The message landed on an otherwise unremarkable Tuesday while I was folding laundry and half thinking about dinner. My sister's contact popped up on my screen, a picture she'd clearly meant to send someone else. I opened it without hesitation, and in that one instant, standing barefoot in my own kitchen, 8 years of marriage revealed itself to be a lie I'd been living without knowing it. There was my husband, cradling two newborns, and beneath the image, the words, "Daddy loves you both." I didn't break down. I didn't scream. Something inside me just went quiet and cold and stayed that way. I'm Nicole Young, 38 years old, and for most of my life, I'd operated on the belief that patience always pays off eventually. By profession, I am a forensic accountant, someone who spends her days hunting for the small cracks people assume will go unnoticed, a number slightly off, a transaction that doesn't fit, a story that sounds right until you look closer. I'd built an entire career on trusting facts over feelings. I never imagined I'd need that same skill set inside my own home. Charles and I married when I turned 30. He was driven and charismatic, someone who lit up any room he walked into. He'd co-founded a logistics business that was finally gaining traction, and I loved watching him turn an idea into something real. We used to imagine our future kids, how many, what we'd call them, city life, or something slower paced. It felt like a sure thing. It wasn't, not for a long while, and not without a fight. 2 years passed before we finally sought medical help. Then came the endless appointments, the tests, a whole vocabulary of fertility treatments that started to feel like a foreign language. IUI, IVF, hormone shots that left my stomach bruised and hidden under baggy clothes. 3 pregnancies ended before they became anything beyond a flicker on an ultrasound. Each loss was a private ache I mostly carried by myself, since Charles always seemed to bounce back quicker than I did. I'd lie awake running the numbers in my head, the same way I would for a client's file, trying to pinpoint where things had gone wrong. I blamed my body, my stress levels, my job, even a glass of wine I'd had before I knew I was pregnant. I blamed anything and everything except the actual truth, because that truth hadn't been visible to me yet. Through it all, Charles sat beside me in waiting rooms, squeezing my hand, repeating the same promise: we'd get through it together. I took him at his word, because doubting him felt impossible. My younger sister Emily, 3 years behind me, was a constant presence too, or so I thought. She was always ready with a hug, a home-cooked meal, an open invitation to call whenever I needed her. She told me often how much she admired my resilience. It never crossed my mind that admiration can sometimes be a mask for envy. The afternoon the photo arrived, I'd just wrapped up a video call with a client. Nothing special, just another quiet stretch of an ordinary day. The autumn light was slanting through the kitchen window when my phone buzzed twice. I glanced down and saw my husband's face, the same man who'd told me barely 3 weeks before that maybe we should attempt one more round of treatment, gazing at 2 newborns as though they were his whole world. Emily called moments later. I answered but stayed silent. "Nicole," she said, her voice breaking, "I never meant for you to find out this way." I ended the call without asking a single thing. I didn't need to. Years of forensic work had taught me a golden rule. The moment you spot the first sign of deception, you don't confront it head on. You collect every piece of evidence first. You map out the entire lie before letting anyone know you've noticed. So instead, I opened my laptop. I searched for the top-rated family law attorney in the city, a man named Daniel Brooks, and booked the soonest slot he had. 2 days later, I sat in his office and signed the paperwork to begin ending my 8-year marriage. My hands stayed perfectly steady. I said nothing to Charles. I said nothing to Emily about what I now knew. That night, I went home and cooked dinner as if nothing had shifted at all, because for the first time in a long time, I understood something with absolute certainty. I had nothing left to explain to anyone. while my husband was busy welcoming 2 children with the woman who used to call herself my sister, both of them assuming I remained completely in the dark. I was already several steps ahead of them, and what came next, quiet, deliberate, without a single tear shed, was something neither of them saw coming. The morning after signing the paperwork, I was up before the sun, brewing coffee for one and feeling absolutely no remorse about it. The night before, Charles had sent a throwaway text about a work trip that would keep him away for a few days. I read it over twice, then got straight to work. If my job has taught me anything, it's that people who think they'll never get caught leave the sloppiest trail behind them. Charles had spent 8 years cultivating an image as the devoted husband who'd weathered infertility beside me. Keeping that story alive took effort, and people busy protecting one narrative rarely notice they're leaving fingerprints on another. I began with the credit card records. Our finances were mostly separate, but we shared one account for household bills. Tucked between grocery runs and utility payments were 4 charges to the same hotel, out in a suburb neither of us had any reason to visit. 2-night stays each time, always Thursday through Friday. I lined those dates up against my phone's location history, which luckily I'd left running. 3 of those hotel stays matched exactly with weeks I was recovering from IVF, weeks Charles had claimed he was staying late at the office to clear his head. I stayed at my kitchen table until close to 2 in the morning, watching 3 years of my marriage rearrange itself into something unrecognizable. Emily had insisted more than once that she was simply driving Charles to appointments on days I couldn't make it. Just helping out, she'd say. But the records showed those trips often happened on days there was no appointment scheduled at all. By the time I stumbled onto an old shared photo cloud, one Charles had forgotten I still had access to, nearly 3 years of images, Emily standing suspiciously close to him at an office holiday party, a weekend trip logged as business with a beach in the background nowhere near any actual client. They hadn't been careful, they just never expected me to look. There's a particular kind of hurt that comes from confirming a betrayal you already half suspected, different from the shock of one you never saw coming. This was the former, and beneath the pain, something colder was forming. Clarity. For 8 years, I'd treated every hard moment in our marriage as my own personal failure. Now I understood I'd been shouldering the weight of choices that were never mine to carry. I didn't confront Charles. I didn't return Emily's call. Instead, I assembled a file. Every hotel charge, every broken alibi, every time-stamped photo telling a truer story than either of them ever had. I laid it out methodically, without commentary, because the facts spoke plainly enough on their own. I sent the whole thing to Daniel Brooks. He looked through it and said simply, "This is thorough." I told him 8 years of noticing what others missed had prepared me well. 3 days later, my phone rang with a number I knew but hadn't expected. Margaret, my mother-in-law. We'd always gotten along warmly, but this call felt different from the second I picked up. Her voice was faint and shaking. "Nicole," she said, then went quiet for a long stretch. When she finally spoke again, she was crying. "Please," she said, "don't tell him yet." Standing in my kitchen, I felt the ground shift under something I'd thought I'd already fully understood. I'd uncovered an affair, but somehow I sensed I hadn't yet uncovered the real truth. I met Margaret 2 days later at a small cafe. She looked worn in a way that had nothing to do with age. "There's something I need you to know," she said before she'd even sat down. "Something I should have told you 8 years ago. I've regretted my silence every day since." Piece by piece, she admitted she'd known something significant almost since the start of our marriage. "Does Emily know?" I asked. She shook her head. "No, neither does Charles. Only me, and Dr. Collins, your old doctor." My stomach dropped. Dr. Rebecca Collins had guided us through nearly every stage of fertility treatment. "There was a report," Margaret said, hands trembling, "from testing, back when you two were trying everything. I saw it before Charles ever did. It came to the house addressed to him by mistake, and I opened it without thinking." She paused. "It wasn't routine. I understood right away that if Charles saw it, something in him would break in a way I didn't think could be fixed. So I made a call to Dr. Collins directly and asked her, mother to mother, to let me handle it my own way, in my own time. She agreed, against her better judgment, because she'd known our family for years and trusted me. Margaret stared at the table. I never did right by anyone. I just postponed the pain until it grew into something far bigger. She didn't hand me the actual report, just a worn note she'd written to herself the day she read it. I can't explain it here, not in fragments. You deserve to see it properly. Her voice broke. Those babies changed everything, Nicole, just not for the reason Charles believes. I called Dr. Collins the next morning. She hadn't heard from me in nearly 5 years. I need my old file, I told her. All of it. After a pause, she said, come by this afternoon. I'll pull it myself. The clinic looked almost unchanged. Dr. Collins met me with a thick folder already waiting. Before I show you this, I want you to know I've carried guilt over this for years. Margaret came to me in genuine distress, and I made a call I wouldn't make again. I let a mother's fear outweigh a patient's right to her own results. I'm sorry, Nicole, truly. Inside the folder were familiar pages, hormone panels, ultrasound notes, but near the back sat a report I'd never laid eyes on, dated almost exactly 8 years back, addressed solely to Charles. I read through the clinical language slowly until its meaning became impossible to miss. The findings weren't about me, they were about Charles, a significant male factor issue, one Dr. Collins had recommended in writing that we discussed together as alternative paths forward. That letter had gone home addressed to him. Margaret had opened it accidentally and instead of passing it along, decided alone in a moment of panic to shield her son from a truth she believed would destroy him. I sat there as 8 years of self-blame reshuffled into something entirely new. Every sleepless night spent calculating what I might have done wrong, every procedure endured, convinced my own body was to blame. None of it had ever truly been mine to bear. Why didn't she ever tell him? I asked. Fear, I think, Dr. Collins said softly. Margaret loved her son fiercely, the kind of love that puts protection above honesty. I doubt she ever considered what it would eventually cost the two of you. My mind drifted to Emily and to that photo of Charles cradling 2 newborns, captioned as though fatherhood were beyond question. If the report held true, those children weren't biologically his. I didn't confront Charles that day. I drove home and sat in the driveway for a long while, the folder resting on the passenger seat, holding the one piece of evidence that changed the meaning of everything else. For almost 2 weeks after I filed the paperwork, I heard nothing from Charles. He was staying at Emily's, playing house with 2 infants who carried a truth he hadn't discovered yet. I spent those weeks quietly finishing what I'd started, meeting with Daniel Brooks, sorting through financial records, moving through the practical steps of ending a marriage while holding a secret that would end it for reasons entirely different from the ones I'd first believed. It was Margaret who called on a Thursday evening, her voice tight with dread. Charles is coming home tonight. He wants me to properly meet the babies. A pause. He's bringing Emily. I understood right away what that would cost her. Margaret, you don't have to do anything you're not ready for. I've kept this hidden for 8 years, Nicole, she said quietly. I think it's time I stopped.